doesn't get easier just because you're a professional. In today's episode, we're diving into the emotional weight of caring for family, even when you have years of experience helping others. We'll explore the realities of burnout, why caregiving impacts entire families across generations, and how new conversations, maybe even a Hollywood documentary, are finally shedding light on this often invisible work.
We're so happy to welcome here to CareLab today Consuela Marshall. She is a graduate of the LSU MC School of Allied Health, and she's been an occupational therapist in home health for 25 years in her community. She has a love for aging older adults and real personal compassion for caregivers because she's been a caregiver, so that she knows the lifestyle of being a caregiver, how it can build you up or tear you down, and the importance of knowing how to balance and find balance for your own good. She's been in homes, she's seen upfront the struggles and the missing emphasis that's given to supporting caregivers, which led her to found Finding a Foothold, which is geared towards educating caregivers and practicing ways of decreasing workloads, increasing safety, and integrating caregiving into your life while also focusing on your needs as a caregiver. Consuela, thank you so much for being here on CareLab today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the introduction. So, yeah, an OT over 25 years, and with that same agency up until recently, and just loving the community. Initially, there in home health, um, seeing a whole generation of families
Mm-hmm.
that have since moved on, and I'm now treating the caregiver who was who was a caregiver at that time, and I was servicing their
Mm.
mom. And
Mm-hmm.
now seeing the next generation is quite eye opening in how caregiving affects generations, and how
Mm.
the using the right tools and having the right approach to caregiving affects how that lifestyle of that person continues. So being able to see those generations and being involved with those generations, seeing them at church, seeing them in the grocery store, they're like, "Hey, Consuela," and I'm like, "Okay, I know you, but I don't know your name," type of thing. I get that a lot, but
Uh-huh.
but I just love the privilege that I've had of being in a community of probably three or four little cities clustered together, and really serving the community and really feeling like I've contributed to really the wellness and increased quality of life of our aging adults here. So I love it. Yeah.
But listen, you just got yourself in trouble because now people are going to ask you, "What's my name?" when they see you in the grocery store. They're going to be like, "Hey, Consuela, what's up? Do you know who I am?"
And you know what? And but in my defense, not a lot of them remember my name. I get called
Okay, that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
Condoleezza. I've been called a lot of things, and I have a lot of made up names that I answer to. So we go into that understanding that we're not going to hold that against each other, but
There
we
you
like
go.
we're there for each other. Yes.
Because well, I have
I love.
so many questions for you, just like about how practice has changed over time, and how just like having that perspective of multiple decades with the same community of people. But I can't ask any of those questions yet because we haven't started with our icebreaker question,
Okay.
which
Okay.
is not too scary. It's about something that's about to happen. So I just
Mhm.
saw that there's an article came out that Bradley Cooper is making a documentary style film on PBS about family caregivers. And so,
Hey, Bradley Cooper, you want to be on the show?
exactly. Come, I
All
mean,
right.
as soon as
Yeah.
it's going to
This
come
is
out
your
next year,
official
come on.
invite.
Yes.
Come on and talk about it when it gets close to releasing. But before that, what we're going to answer is I want to know like what things, like if there's maybe two things, because I'm horrible at answering just one. So if there's two things maybe that you could think of that you would really want them to touch on in that was important to you.
Yes, I saw that. I saw that post, and I'm excited about the increased attention that's in the media in regard to family caregiving.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Good question. I'm always going to go back to the resources. When are the resources going to arrive to the family caregivers? The talk is needed, the awareness. There needs to be this heightened awareness of the stress and the lack of resources that are available to caregivers. But they're also, can they use their fame and position and really go the extra yard of getting those resources expedited to the families? The waiting lists
Mhm.
are long, and the policies are slow to pass as the bills are going into uh, to the different government parties. Um, the question I would say is, what can be done on another level? Yes, this is a place to
Mhm.
start, but what can be done now for those who are waiting in the trenches? Because there's going to be a gap. I mean, the people who are in the trenches now are suffering, and we're seeing the suffering. I just wish there could be this pool of their resources, their things that, um, in their voice, that can help expedite those resources to the community. So I'm proud of what he's doing, and I'm appreciative of it. And I know of one of the families that is going to be highlighted on his
Oh,
um,
wow.
Ooh, you
documentary.
fancy.
Well, I don't know. Well, I am in a close acquaintance just because we met on IG, and I've had the privilege of being involved in a webinar with her and doing some things with her. But she's very vocal in sharing her life story on Instagram, and she recently posted that she will be included in a documentary. So I think he's on the right start is there. So I'm saying yes, thank you for what you're doing, Bradley, but things need to be done now. The resources need to be
Mhm.
done right now for those who really need it.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, honestly, I could like say a lot of things, but I would say I think that the most important approach for anything that's really investigating the world of family caregivers is it has to look at things from multiple sides of
Mhm.
the
Yes.
equation. Like, as Consuela highlighted, looking at things from the legislative and policy side, but also, talking with healthcare providers that are trying to provide these services, really understanding why sometimes that works and why sometimes that doesn't, and where those gaps are. Because, a lot of times we're talking about resources. One of the resources that family caregivers have a lot of difficulty accessing is that professional help that
That's
they
Mhm.
right.
can't necessarily always directly access because they are the caregiver, not the patient, right? And so I think looking at it from a holistic approach to really see, like, what are all the pieces of this puzzle, as much as that's possible. I mean, I think that's the key to putting together something that's really special and unique, and that's going to help inform the general public and the situation overall in a way that can move things forward positively.
Yes.
And also, you should probably come on CareLab.
Absolutely. This is your open
And
Yeah.
invitation.
I mean, that's an open invitation. Hey, I mean, if you needed, we could probably make time to be a part of this as well. I mean, I know we're pretty busy, but
But
it's
we can make some
possible.
exceptions.
It could make some exceptions. I'm not saying, I'm just saying.
I think
Yes.
in addition to what y'all both said, the thing, storytelling is so important. And almost nothing gets done without telling a story, including legislation, right? Because what is our process in this country? It's you got to get a representative on some part of Congress to feel and understand the importance of your story, to be like, yeah, this is important and we should try to fix it. Like, that's the only way the stuff gets done. And so I think that creating a documentary style film about it is going to, of course, lean into that. And
Yes.
documentaries do a great job of talking about how horrible things are. And that's true, and they should, so that people can feel the weight of what
Yes.
nearly everybody encounters in their life at some point, at least once, but nobody expects to deal with it. If that makes
Mhm.
it doesn't make sense, but that's what happens.
Yes.
Um, So I just hope that it doesn't stop short of just like talking about the problem
That's it. That's
without
it.
like giving actionable solutions and putting some actionable solutions into play. Not just like at the top level, but also at the individual family caregiver level. Like,
That's gonna
you watch
filter
this whole
down.
movie and here
Mhm.
are some things that you can connect with
Yeah.
today that can help you.
Yes, exactly. Totally agree with that, Brandy.
That was
I hope for the whole thing.
that was
Yes.
a good that was a good way to start the conversation. I feel like now, I mean, we have lots of things that we got to talk about with Consuela, but we could spend a lot of time going down that rabbit hole.
Yes.
Yeah, I do have a question for you though. So your first thing was like resources. And so what is, I can guess, but I want to hear from you. What is your definition of resources? What are the resources that are missing and that we need?
Oh gosh, so many. I would just start by having that true. I'm going to really pull from something Amelia said, that having that listening ear, a resource of allotting the time for physicians to really serve their patients and the caregiver. It just has to start with, you don't know what's going on in their life if there is not a code or something that will allow a physician to sit down and take the time to really see what's at the heart of what's going on with his patients. Because if they have only a certain amount of time, because guess what? They have to get paid too, and they have a lot of clients that are in the waiting room. But in
Mhm.
making even just legislature or letting them to be heard on a level where somebody can get eye to eye with them, so that they know what the true needs are, and that there are things put in place where they are directed to these different resources that are being made, that can be made available to them. Um, Caregivers are often pushed to the back in doctors' visits and just in their role, because they're often not seen and heard. So I think starting at the bottom with, like, let's make it, it's good to have these shows, and looking in the media with the CBS, I believe, was the network that did a series of different morning shows with Gail King about at least three or four families talking about this caregiving crisis, which is good. It needs to start there. Everyone needs to be aware of the over 53 million family caregivers. But how do you get their ear? How do you know what the need is, unless somebody down at the level of where the care is being provided can really tap into what the needs are for that individual family? Yeah, this is good and it's great to highlight and get those stories. But if it's not going to come back to, what, after the story, we need to have legislature where there is something on the grassroots level that allows the physician, because it has is what, the medical staff has to be a key part of getting those resources, meaning, first of all, letting the voices be heard, and then having ways of effectively funneling these resources and channels to caregivers so that they can tap into the respite care, tap
Yeah.
into um, having more accountability for what happens at discharge. What are more options at discharge for those living with dementia, or those that need that
Mhm.
additional stay in the hospital, instead of sending them home so long and so quickly into home health, which is not always the appropriate setting. So I think
Mm-hmm.
just the ground roots of listening to caregivers and having that ability to have those channels set in place is the resource that needs to start. If you give them an ear, caregivers will really tell you what's wrong and what
Mm-hmm.
they're
Mm-hmm.
needing,
Yeah.
but
You know,
unfortunately not being heard.
Can I piggyback off that a little bit too? Because I think that the way that our healthcare system is set up, we have the physician at the center of this ring, and then it's their responsibility to dole everything out. But I'm going to make a very specific legislative suggestion here that would be really helpful for caregivers in particular, and that is direct access to people like occupational therapists. So, what that means, dear listener, is direct access is basically where instead of having to go to your physician to get an order to go see an occupational therapist or a physical therapist or whoever you need, you can actually just go to see that person directly without having to go through your physician first. And that's available on a varying level through some states, and in some states it's not at all. But the fact is that a lot of times the physician solves a portion of the problem, right? Or they can help a little bit with the medical side of things. But if you really need someone, and caregivers need someone who is boots on the ground, knows what their day-to-day life looks like, can actually provide them with training, suggestions, and resources that practically tell them what to do in those situations. And that person is the occupational therapist. So if we can provide direct access to occupational therapists for family caregivers without having to go through that additional layer of someone who is stressed out, doesn't have enough time, maybe doesn't understand everyone's role in the medical team or everyone's full scope of practice, then we can do a lot of good for family caregivers. And that is a very specific, like, legislative change that could happen that would make a big difference for folks.
I like that. I like that a lot. So it's just like this, just getting to the talking about it and really getting, more input after these after the documentaries with the extended or broadened heightened look at the caregiver stress, is having conversations like this that would say what is not working and what are some feasible changes that can be made to discover what those resources need to be that are going to help the family caregiver.
You're both saying two different things, but they definitely overlap. So like, Consuela, you're saying like the system is currently set up that we need to go to the physician, and the physician needs to have more time to be able to dole out more of the stuff, because they are, I would argue, not the center of the circle, but the top of the pyramid. And then everything has to flow down from them. And so you're saying, hey, if you're going to be the leader and the person in charge of all this stuff, which is actually well more than you could probably manage, to be a social worker and to be an occupational therapist and to be able to like have all these resources and be like, you need this and this and this, you need more time to deal with that. That's fair. But I don't know that that's actually possible in the way that our payment system is set up. There are new codes that have come in some ways, but there's not as much available. And so my question is, short of the changes in legislation to have direct access to OT, for example, how do you feel about, or have you seen any things, pros or cons, about the senior care primary care establishments that have been set up all over the country, where they highlight have the physicians have fewer patients, they only work with older adults, they often have a social worker or some kind of community access person available, like the Centerwells and the Archwells, and I'm sure there's plenty more that exist in different parts of the country, but like they're set up to do kind of what you're saying, Consuela. Have you worked with very many of them? How do you feel about that model? Any insights?
Well, I'm really not familiar with the model, but I do see the buildings. I see them coming up, several new buildings around town, and it has piqued my interest, and I've done a little research on them, but not really understanding the full model of what they do. Uh, but it could be that step that's needed, and in just answering your question, I don't feel like more needs to be dumped on the physician, but I do think that at the ground level of somebody needs to, the caregiver needs to have access to something. They need to have access to resources. So maybe I can retract a little bit, saying maybe I'm not saying it all falls on the physician, but for that moment that you can get their ear, they need to be compensated for time when there seems to be that there's more under the surface that needs to be discussed for this patient. So let me take this allotted time to sort of see, let me take this allotted time to make the referrals. I'm listening and I'm clicking the buttons and I'm making some connections so that when they leave my office, it's not that I see them again in 3 months and nothing has been done. So I think there needs to be something crafted in the way of, yes, allow for the physicians an opportunity to have those times. And maybe these centers are going to sort of bridge some of that that gap, if indeed the model will be that the physicians are going to be there to listen and more time for the, maybe that's that added piece for family caregivers or for those individuals who need that more one-on-one attention that can't be provided by a physician that has a whole waiting room. And I do know that their
Hmm.
reimbursement levels are not what they probably used to be, and the volume that they have to see in competing in the healthcare system. Being realistic, it has something needs to change. But I think going back to the very root of my what initial spurred my answer is, what is a resource that caregivers need? They need an ear. They need
Hmm.
someone who's going to listen. So maybe it's not all the physician. Direct access is a part of it. And what you've just brought up is making me think maybe that's something I'm going to pay more attention to. But to be honest, Brandy, although that I'm seeing the buildings and I've seen the
Hmm.
commercials that are starting to play, but I really hadn't really thought real deeply about the role and really the benefits of having them in the community. I hope they're going to be great for us.
Hmm.
So shifting tacks just a little bit here. One of the things that I really love about everything that you do, Consuela, is I've noticed that a lot of your like messages, a lot of your content, it revolves around this idea of shifting the narrative of being a caregiver and like shifting the perspective of that. Can you talk a little bit
Oh,
like
yeah.
about where you're coming from and tell us about that?
Well, yes. Finding a foothold, that's the heart of what I do. Finding a foothold is um, the consulting agency that I founded, geared on helping caregivers and aging older adults in that season of life. So it entails a lot of things on the aspect of that are geared toward that aging older adult, but also in the caregiver um, frame. I do think there needs to be so much of a mind shift change in how caregivers view caregiving and their role and what that should entail in their roles. So in finding a foothold, that is just finding your way of doing caregiving that is specific to you and for your needs in the current season of your life. Um, for many of us as caregivers, and me included, because I care for my mom, and I started on the wrong trail and had to really make some pivots that took a little bit longer than I thought before I pivoted because I was headed down the wrong road, like many caregivers are doing, in that we take on the role of caregiving with such a narrow perspective. Yes, there is a Webster definition of what caregiving means, but we have to take that into the context of our life. What are we on this put on this earth to do, and what are our current responsibilities? And we have to look at the need levels of the one you're caring for and see how you can bring those two things together. What are the limits and what are your limits in your life? And there's often a gap in between what their needs are and what your capabilities are. And how do you fill that gap? What are the things that
Hmm.
you need to do as a caregiver so that you don't lose your life, you don't lose your sanity, your health, your relationships, and other things that make you important? So I like to emphasize that we all must craft a definition of caregiving that is specific for our life by first identifying and knowing who we are. And sometimes we will lose that in the beginning because we run into that burning fire of caring for your loved one because it's urgent. They've had the surgery, had
Hmm.
the diagnosis or whatever, and we can put everything on the back burner because our heart is not going to be able to look at all of that because we are needed right here. But
Hmm.
when this is going to be a long burning fire, it's going to be there for a while, then we have to go into a survival mode of we're not going to fix this, but how can we make this manageable? What can we do so that we're not slowly dropping off things out of our life because their needs are getting greater and we're not there for our children, not there for our husband, not looking at other opportunities that should be brought into the picture of caregiving to help fill those gaps so that at the end of your caregiving journey, you're not left this empty person, this person that was just so driven by what dad wanted, what mom wanted, and you weren't able to have those hard conversations about you also still have a life. And in the same way, things are different for you in your life, you have to talk to your loved one about things are going to be different in their life too. You cannot keep all things stacked up the way they had them stacked when they were orchestrating
Mm.
things in their life. The days that
Mm-hmm.
they did this and they did it this way, but now you're there and you're trying to keep all the cards stacked up in the same way. Um, it's not possible. And you're going to find that that person that you were and so happy to be able to serve your mom, your dad, you may still have that under your heart somewhere because you're still showing up, but what you're demonstrating and what you're living out and what other people are seeing in the changes in your life and your personality and your health are changed. And we're often the last person to see it because we're so focused on their needs that we don't see how we're putting things that are also important in our life so much further on the back burner that some of those things won't be able to be retrieved at the
Yeah.
end of the caregiving journey. So yeah.
Mm. I think you said so many important points. The thing that stands out to me the most is um, you said that you were headed down
Mhm.
a wrong pathway
Yes.
and in caring for your own mom.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that when you were doing that, you were already an OT and had
Oh,
experience
yes.
working with
Yes.
other
This was
caregivers.
not too long ago. I mean, yes. Now, my mom has been passed away for several years now. But as an OT and going into homes, I had on the lens of really helping the patient and doing caregiver training. They come together as OTs. You can't just look at
Yeah.
one and not do the other. So, in doing
Same.
that,
Yeah.
the mechanics of okay, this situation in this home is not set up. We've got to do some changes here. This dresser, I know she loves it. She had it since she was married, but is in the wrong place, and really telling them this has to leave. You have to do this and the modifications and the training on the technique. We
Hmm.
do that as OTs, and I did it for years. But when it was my mom, and and I would tell caregivers that, and they would be like, "Yeah." Then I'll come back the next week; it hadn't been moved. Mom don't want to move it, and and then just all these things you just see, and I'm discharging them, and I'm like, I've told you all I know. It's now time for you to do it, and not really understanding what makes a person not do the very thing that's going to keep them healthy and keeping them involved in the
Hmm.
care
Hmm.
until it was my mom, and that emotional part that just overrides sanity sometimes. As an
Hmm.
OT, I knew there were certain things I was doing too much of. And then there were certain things that just went over my head because I couldn't even think. I mean, that doesn't apply to us. This is my mama, that kind of thing, that kind of mentality
Mm.
just had crept in until while I knew the mechanics of OT, I knew transfers. I knew setting up I made modifications for her to accommodate her need when she came into live with me and my family. Did all of those things, but I was doing so much because she wanted things
Mm-hmm.
done at a certain time and in a certain way, and just the frequency of the transfers and the frequency of doing this, and I was doing all of the things the right way, but I was doing too much of it, and I was
Mm.
not always there, and I was didn't have the patience for the homework and then not getting out of the structure of okay boys, are your things in the book sack, or this and this and this, all of the things that made me function and my household run smoothly, they were just thrown out of the window because I was trying to please and keep this routine that she had in her home. So that was the mistake I made until I just really saw that my house wasn't the same.
Hmm.
Just the cadence of getting up, going to work, getting kids to school, dropping them off, everything was thrown off because I was moving more to her rhythm instead of taking both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Not taking away everything that made her her, but all just saying, look, I have to have this way because I'm flying through the light because I'm trying to get to the school because if I don't drop them off, I got to get out of that car, walk them into it
Sign
because you got
me
to
in.
sign them in if you don't drop them off. And I'm like, I'm not getting out because I'm half dressed and I'm late and, and I'm doing all of this, so I'm like, I was always on the rush, always doing these things and making poor choices because I was trying to stay in a cadence that she was orchestrating. And one of the things was that she loved morning baths. Why I thought I can put a morning bath in the middle of already chaos with, did you put your PE uniform? Where are your shoes? All of it was already chaotic getting out of the house. And then I'm gonna throw in a morning bath. It was those kind of things that I had to say, you know what? These morning baths are no longer happening because I can't. And having those hard conversations and getting the silent treatment and the pouting and I know she's mad at me, but I am not we're just not going to do it. And really setting these ground rules that you're looking at what's essential and what is just a habit and a custom that she was used to, and really having to make those changes. So with Brandy, that's one example I really use a lot in my group coaching, that don't overthink this. Look at your life and look at where you're running off the track at, and you'll really see it's easy to get back on track, but you have to make hard decisions. And the hardest ones is when you've got to go against the one you're caring for. And then, of course, and not wanting to do what other people think you should be doing. You just got to turn all that noise off and do what's right for you in supporting what are the true needs of the one that you're caring for.
There's two things that really, okay, one thing that like super jumped out at me about what you were talking about, and then I have like a question for both of you actually to piggyback back off of that. One is that I think that you really highlighted here that the fact that when we bend over backwards to meet anyone else's needs, it doesn't matter what the relationship is, right? Like when we are only thinking about someone else's needs and not our own, and we don't have a relationship that is built on mutual compromise and respect, that's what we would call a toxic relationship, right? That's not good no matter who. If you were married to someone and it was all one-sided, that probably wouldn't be a very good marriage. If you were best friends with someone and it was all one-sided, it probably wouldn't be a very good friendship. You're basically taking that and saying like, hey, this is no different for the person that you're caring for. This is a relationship. It's an important relationship, but there has to be compromise mutually and mutual respect here. Otherwise, like it's not a healthy relationship truly for anyone. And then the question that I have for you guys is, and I think this is kind of a difficult question to really know the answer to, because historically most caregivers are women. And that, of course, I don't want to discount from the male caregivers that are out there. I know that there are men out there who are the primary caregivers in their situations and their families. And, hats off. And I mean, it's not an easier job for a man than it is for a woman. I think it's a hard job no matter who you are. But historically, most caregivers have been women because that's the role that women have been placed in. And I have a point. At the same time, women are also taught, like we're brought up largely, at least in this culture, to be people pleasers. We are brought up to set aside what we need and make sure that everyone else is okay. And I feel like that's part of what happens sometimes in these caregiving relationships that become so one-sided. Because if you have someone who, and it could be any gender, of course, but if you have someone who's taught that your job is to really put yourself aside and make everyone else happy, then you put that into a caregiving relationship where someone is sick or unwell, and that is like on steroids. And so I wonder, do you think that in your experience, when you've worked with caregivers who were men, did you see them have those same kinds of boundary issues and like lack of compromise that we kind of are talking about here? Did you see that same thing occurring with men who were caregivers? If you even have a big enough sample size for that.
Not a big enough sample.
Sorry, that was a long question.
Yes. I don't know because even there are some that jump in and do it all. When I say all, I mean ALL. Every ADL, they do it, um,
Mm-hmm.
and do it well. Even with a son who's caring for a mom, I've seen it. And but I would say just in the short responses, I don't think they have the because the duties are often so different. I don't get to see the ones that are directly involved in the hands-on care. So where they may not be able to put limits on things, it may not have been something that I had privilege to see, but I would expect they may be better at the limits than us as women, for the most part.
I have a like really good example of this, and I worked with a family who the son was caring for his probably 80 something year old mother, and he was doing literally he was willing to do all the things, but he drew a specific boundary in that he did not want to give her a shower, and not that he wasn't willing. He knew that she needed to be bathed and she needed his help. She needed some help, but he felt strongly that he was her son and she should have the dignity of not having her son wash her. And that in like you could look at it two ways and say like that's super selfish of you. You don't want to help your mom do the thing that maybe she doesn't want a stranger doing, she'd rather you do. But I also, just the way that he said it made me feel like, oh, this is like the most caring thing he feels like he could do,
Right.
because he not only wanted to maintain this essentially illusion, because he's helping her with toileting and other stuff, but just maintain this um, boundary of like, this is a space for you and another woman or somebody else, and this is not a space for me and you, but I care deeply about you. I'm going to make sure that this problem does get solved, though. It wasn't just like we just don't deal with it. He dealt with it. And I feel like that stood out to me because I think plenty of other people feel similarly, but they don't like take the initiative to say like, I'm not going to just play around this area and just kind of half do it because I don't want to do it or I feel these feelings about it. I'm going to literally put a system in place that allows us to respect these boundaries. And so I thought that was super strong. And I don't know that I've seen very many women take that kind of stance, even if they had that feeling in their
Mhm.
heart. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah, I feel like that pretty closely aligns with my experience as well in working with like male family caregivers versus female family caregivers. The and really partly is maybe a difference in expectation too, right? It's just expected, I think, a
Mhm.
lot of times that the daughter, a lot of times it's the oldest daughter, is expected to just go in and be comfortable with all of those things. And I
Mhm.
think whether you're a man or a woman, it's reasonable to maybe not be comfortable with all of those levels of care. But I think maybe sometimes it's a little bit easier for men to speak up
Mhm.
about about having that discomfort, versus a woman. And again, I say that knowing that obviously that can't reflect everyone's experience. I'm sure that there are men out there who are also doing they're engaging in care and they feel like they don't have a choice and they're going to go ahead and do it all. And the experience can be different depending on the individual. But I think as a trend, I feel like that's what I've seen.
So my question is, when you think back, Consuela, to when you made the connection that like, hey, I'm upholding my mom's routine in a way that's unsustainable for the way our routines work here, and I'm still going to care for her, but we need to maybe have a conversation about this. And you alluded to some silent treatment and some negative responses from that. Can you give us a little bit more? I want to take. I kind of just want to understand you at that moment, and like how you could deal with that communication issue. Like, what were some actionable steps? Because so many people are avoiding having this conversation because they don't want to deal with whatever the outcome is. And like, it
Mhm.
just would be great to hear you say how you did go through that, like initiating it and then also dealing with the after effects of
Yes.
it and then moving on from
Yeah,
it
it's
too.
always hard when you have to say no to a parent. Are you able to hear me, Emily? Okay.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, go ahead.
it's always hard when you have to do it the first time. because all of these feelings about this is disrespectful. She's done so much for me. All of these things. And like, if
Mm-hmm.
I don't do this, then I'm not being the good daughter. But when you have to weigh it against what are the things you're losing, what are the in your overall well-being, is for me, I just had to rehearse the conversations with myself first and telling myself, you got to stay respectful, but you've got to be firm, and you've really got to say the reasons of the why. Like, and even put myself, like, if this was me, what would make me understand a little bit better if I knew why? Then I could be okay a little bit with it. So really, in just saying, you know what, it's just too much, to, like tipping around, toe tipping around the subject, when I know feel like my whole house was on fire, but then I just want to like just tiptoe around her. It's just like really having the hard conversations. And once you've had one, it just like it takes the pressure off. It takes that insecurity, that feeling that you have, in that you're standing up to this person. It sort of takes that stress away. So for me, and when I'm explaining to people, like, you've got to really research this yourself, and you've got to really have these conversations outside of the situation. Don't wait till this morning. She's packing her stuff and headed to the bathroom. I'm like, that wasn't the time to do it. It's like having the
Mm-hmm.
conversations, and really even saying, this is a hard conversation because I know this is something X, Y, and Z. But these are some things that I need to talk about, because these are the fallouts that have been occurring because of this. So having those conversations and really going back, I think for one while I was just so mad, like, she is so inconsiderate. She doesn't care about anybody for herself. All of these feelings come. But in the heart of the matter, I did see my mom understand when I said, I am tired of running out of this house. I can't find my keys. I'm disorganized. I'm running red lights, and I'm flying across the school parking lot about to hit a child. I'm just like going through all of these scenarios, just really trying to tell
Mm-hmm.
her things are out of hand. I cannot. Once she got over that, and we have to come back with a compromise. Okay, mom, we're going to do it at night. Or if you want to get up at 5 in the morning, I'll do it then. Or, just trying to come to some kind of agreement that there's one way to fry this thing. There's one way to get this thing done, that it doesn't have to always be a hard no. Some things will be a hard no. And there came some times when I was like, Mom, we're not doing that ever again. I almost killed myself, killed you. That ain't going to happen again. There are some things you're going to put a big X on, because they're just not conducive to anybody's health. But there are a lot of things that can be compromised. And if you have that parent that just don't want to do it, then you know what? With time they can come around, but if not, it just has to be, you have to stand your ground in saying, the relationship with my husband is a lot meaningful. I need him to stay. I need to be able to do things with my kids. I don't get these years back. I don't want all of their
Mm-hmm.
years of that. Oh my, you fussed at us so much. I mean, yeah, those things will happen if you don't start to put things in order and have those hard, tough conversations with them and getting their input. If you get their input, even if you go to the extreme and go give two things to the far extreme, that they're not going to go with either one of them, they will often come up with something in the middle that they will agree
Mm-hmm.
to, that can help move things more toward the middle of something working out for the good. Yeah.
Well, Consuela, you are so wonderful. I can't tell you how happy we are that you've been on CareLab today. But before we go, would you share with everyone where they can find you, because you have such like wonderful information and content out there, and you're such a fabulous resource yourself. Where can people find you?
Okay. The hub is findingafoothold.com. It's a place where you start, and you'll learn about. I do have a podcast as well. I'm not as active on it, and I try to get one out once a month, and one should be releasing soon. But starting there, you'll find out a little bit about me, about a podcast and a blog that I do. And I have two types of group coaching programs. one geared for that aging older adult, and really focus on aging in place. How to keep them safe in their home and not needing to go live with sister, or live with daughter, or daughter come live with you. Keeping them safe, and then one for the caregiver on setting boundaries and really staying in touch with the important aspects of who you are during your caregiving season, and really you choosing what to put on the back burner, because you can't do it all. When you accept the role of caregiving, something leaves the plate for a season, but as a caregiver, you get to decide what those things are by making the choices that you need to make for your life. So the group coaching programs are listed on the website, and any information about all of my social media platforms, they're all finding a foothold. So if you go to finding a foothold across the platforms, you'll find me, or just going back to the website, there are links to all the social media platforms.
So I appreciate you coming on so much, and I really hope that, because I gained a lot of information from this, that people will understand, like, you coming from not only a professional but a person who also has been a family caregiver, who has all of this knowledge already as a professional,
Yeah,
still had struggles with it, and
I
still
did.
had to like redirect, and
Yeah.
just like that gives license to everybody to
Oh, yeah.
understand that they can make those mistakes too, and then maybe learn from our own other mistakes, and so that you don't have to make them yourself, but just like it gives a sense of hope to know that, like, you're
Yeah.
not doing any of this alone. You're the only one who's had this problem, and even professionals
Oh, yeah.
had to take a second look and like set their boundaries and
Yeah.
consider it differently. So thank you so much for sharing with us.
Oh, you're very welcome. Glad to be here. Yes.
Yeah, thank you again for being here. Thank you, listeners, for listening to or watching this episode of CareLab. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you take a second to click that little subscribe button. Make sure that you're sharing it too with anyone that you think might benefit from this information. And we will see you next time
On the
on
CareLab.
CareLab.